All right, well,
Welcome back, everybody.
we apologize for some minor technical difficulties there.
It is Friday.
Yeah, praise Jesus. But it's officially after 10 o'clock, so we might as well dive right in.
Yep.
We've got a little bit of an exciting announcement for you at the end, so stay tuned. We're also going to be talking about some of the other resources and places that we go online to stay up to date. So would love to see any comments from any of our viewers about maybe things that you guys try to use to stay up to date or learn a little bit about. Maybe there'll be some of the same, and maybe we'll get a few new resources out of it.
You never know.
But we've got a couple of interesting topics lined up for you today. Nolan, you've got some security updates to talk about.
Yes and no. I was just going to briefly touch on the big buzzword, the GDPR. You know, that's talking about privacy issues that are coming up, especially in EU.
So what does that stand for, that acronym? Do you know?
It's, and I wrote it down.
I'm asking
General
Michael.
Data Protection Regulation.
Okay.
It's regulation has been passed in the EU, and will go into effect on May 25th. And so when I was first listening and hearing about it, I thought, well, it's just EU. It's not going to really do anything. But Tabaria, one of our colleagues, wrote an interesting blog that's posted on our website, how Facebook is adapting to the GDPR. So these social networks are already making changes that they need to because of their platforms being used overseas as well. So will it affect American companies? Yes, it will. I found another interesting article by Forbes. Yes, the GDPR will affect your U.S.-based business. It was interesting. There are a lot of nuances. So if you haven't really looked at the GDPR and how it could affect you, I highly recommend checking out the Forbes article, or also a website I found, eugdpr.org, because there's a lot of nuances. I mean, there's a lot of information on what's going to be changed. Some of the things that I found interesting that this regulation will affect is right to access. As an individual, and somebody collects my information, I have a right to that information that they collected. The right to be forgotten kind of plays into giving consent. And one of the other, what they call privacy by design. So a lot of these apps and different things, like my wife and kid play, like, what superhero are you? Those things always collected a lot of data.
Surveys.
Yeah, those surveys collect a lot of data.
Those surveys do you dirty.
And then it's like, okay, well, this survey is out there. Oh, well, as an afterthought, we have this privacy, sign up. Well, they're saying that when you develop this data collection stuff, that needs to be incorporated right from the get-go. It can no longer be an afterthought.
Because a lot of times they just won't give you results unless you sign off and say, okay, yeah, this is fine. They won't give you, and then who wants to fill out a survey and not get their results, like what Disney character they are or whatever, right?
It'll be interesting, because some of the conversations we've had here in the office is, who will it really affect? Will it really make a difference? Because when all that came out about those Facebook surveys, my wife didn't care. She still does them. And it's like, so who in the general populace will really be adamant about getting their privacy information, making sure their information stays private, and then how many people really just won't?
That's just so interesting to me, because that we don't see how that data is collected or where it's housed, or it's kind of arbitrary, right? So it's just kind of floating out there, and maybe we're not so aware of it as we shred papers and documents, and maybe we do that because they're tangible.
Right.
And so that's always interesting to me to see. You made the reference, like your wife and your daughter still fill out those surveys and maybe really don't care a whole lot. It's just really interesting to me, because that data is probably more valuable than anything you might put on a piece of paper and shred.
Yeah.
And we also talked about, yes, it's going to affect American-based companies, and I think that's just a testament to how interconnected everything is.
Yes.
It was passed in the EU, but what platforms and what communications do we have every day that circle the globe?
Right.
And so even though, maybe you're not doing business directly with somebody in the EU, the platforms that you use might be and are are making those adjustments, and who knows how long before something similar maybe makes it to our government systems to work through. So
if you haven't looked into it, it's worth a check. So like I said, EUGDPR.org. Forbes had that really good article.
You
yes,
could probably
GDPR
post some
will affect
links.
this. Yeah, I think we could do that.
Cool. Awesome.
So Sam asks, do you foresee legislation being passed in the U.S.?
Have you guys been following any of the court stuff about Facebook and Cambridge Analytica stuff?
Not in depth, which is kind of one of the things that kind of led me to investigating this. But to Sam's question, I do believe eventually, to this degree, I don't know, because like some of the things too that this GDPR covers are some pretty hefty fines if you don't follow their legislation. And I know the U.S. does have some privacy laws in effect. I don't know if there is broad reaching like the EU.
Yeah, so the reason that I brought up, that Facebook stuff is because I think through that we've learned that maybe some of our policymakers are not as aware of the ins and outs of what digital is capable of.
True.
Or what the possibilities are. So I think there's a little bit of a learning curve. So how that shakes out into how things are going to maybe be passed or be implemented, I think is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of really smart people that are behind a lot of this digital online stuff that have a really deep knowledge. And I think in order to effectively pass something, there's going to need to be some education.
Yep.
Otherwise, that I think will be really interesting. Americans are usually pretty outspoken, right? So.
Yeah.
So another question from Sam. What is your opinion? Should businesses be able to collect your data without asking for consent?
First of all, I thought it was Sam's day off. What's he doing?
Yeah, Sam,
Sam, go. No,
you're supposed to be driving, not texting.
What is he doing today? No. Should businesses have to ask before collecting your information?
Yes.
So we were actually just talking this morning about a website that Jess was, getting on their mailing list, and they had like a double or triple opt-in of her email address and her zip code. Of like, are you sure? Are you sure? And I think, if there's a form and you have the choice or not to fill out that form, right? So whatever information they're going to ask on there, you can populate if you want. But I think the question then becomes, if you give that information to somebody, what are they able to use it for? What did you authorize or allow them to use it for?
Well, I think Sam's asking should businesses be able to collect your data without asking?
So like cooking you on a website or tracking
your trends.
Right, so like if you're cooking on a website, that's the browser. So
Yeah.
you accept those terms and conditions with the browser.
And I think there's,
to
to a certain degree, having an interaction with a company, there's a certain amount of information that would be transmitted anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I think the depth of that, so like, your name and your contact would be a natural connection that a company would gather. But, like how many kids you have, what,
Sam's
how
getting us
old
down a
they
rabbit
are, I mean, there are certain pieces of information that I think are just general.
So my question is, would you get that information if somebody came into your brick and mortar? So I think that's how, that's how we've shopped or done business for so long, is face to face. So what information would you be able to gather from somebody if they walked into the door of your establishment versus
without
communicating you online?
Now, gathering information on what cars I purchase, how many times I go to a restaurant, and all that other information is not something that I would naturally just give anybody. So I don't think you should be able to gather that without my permission.
Well, what if I'm not associating your name to it though? So like there's trends and stuff that you can track. I mean, we track trends online and stuff too of, what pages on our website are people going to spend the most time on, tells us what kind of content people are interested in. Or, is there a page on our website that men go to more often than women? But I don't have any names associated to it. I can't trace that back to Nolan Webb.
Or can you?
This blog. I don't know.
Get out the tinfoil, Sam.
Anyway, So I recently went to a MarTech conference
Yes.
and talked a lot about machine learning and artificial intelligence and augmented reality and a whole bunch of really great technical terms, buzzwords. And I've been just doing a lot. I've been reading through a lot of the presentations of presenters I wasn't able to go through, and just reading a lot more about it because putting automation, AI, and machine learning kind of all putting in perspective of where those fall together has been really interesting to me. So I've been learning a lot about it and how data informs all of that. And I just thought it was really interesting how a lot of machine learning or artificial intelligence is incorporated into a lot of the things that we do that I don't think maybe we're as aware about. You know, so as marketers, we're like, how can we use machine learning or how can we use artificial intelligence to enhance marketing campaigns, right? So that's something that we're talking about how do we help our clients do things like that. And I was reading an article that actually Marsha forwarded to me from LinkedIn, and it talked about how Barbie is using machine learning or artificial intelligence in their products. So there's a Barbie that has a necklace with a speaker on it that listens to whatever the kid is saying and will respond. There's like 8,000 or so like responses that are in this catalog or whatever, but the Barbie like analyzes what the child said to then pick out the most appropriate response. So you know, like the toys that used to
Because that's not freaky at all.
No.
it's a better version of the toys that you used to, push the button and they would have catchphrases or whatever, and they would just circulate maybe like the same 5 over and over again. But Barbie is going to pick one of 8,000 phrases that makes the most sense to respond to whatever you just said or asked her. So I thought that was like my favorite example of how artificial intelligence is incorporated into.
I think I need my tinfoil because all I see is Skynet.
But yeah, so, and there are just some interesting cases in here, and I think, I think sometimes we, as an industry, get really excited about new technology and buzzwords and maybe don't take into consideration about how some of those things are already integrated into what we do. The data analysis and collection to be able to identify trends, and then allow processes to be automated and essentially make our work and our lives a little bit more efficient, and in Barbie's case, maybe a little bit more interesting.
Or awkward.
You know what? As a little kid, I wasn't super into Barbies, but that would have been really cool. Because then, like, your toy is engaging with you. It's like a friend,
I'm kind
right?
of hating
Like,
myself, but Teddy Ruxpin was freaky enough. Now, a Barbie that's going to intelligently talk to my child, yeah.
I'm okay.
but I mean, so maybe that's not like a super practical use, but like American Express, for example, uses machine learning with their data analysis to be able to detect fraud in real time. So instead of letting things happen and waiting and after the fact and being like, oh, this is probably a fraud charge, they're able to use the data that they've collected from that individual users or users like them to detect, okay, this purchase is outside any trend we've ever seen. It's a fraud. Don't let the card pass. So in that case, it's making your bank account and your financial
protecting you
more secure.
But it's still not perfected because there's a lot of times that it will decline people's cards when they're just making a purchase, like maybe it's something they saved up for.
Right.
Sure.
So
right.
then they, but it's still probably a good precaution.
Yeah. And through all my reading and stuff, just how data and data analysis informs that machine learning. Your machine learning or your artificial intelligence, those processes and things that you're doing are only ever going to be as good as the data that you have.
True.
So, that spirals into a whole other conversation about how we're collecting data and what we're using that data for. But, yeah. So, Nolan, we referenced a lot of sources that we've gone to, to even just talk about the topics for today. For what we do at Key Media, we spend a lot of time trying to stay up to date and learning and reading. What are some of your favorite sources that you go to?
I've always gotten emails from eMarketer. Mm-hmm. I like them. They cover a large gambit of digital information topics. And then Ashley Eining, colleague of ours, turned me on to @Espresso or @Espresso. And so I get notifications and
It's
emails.
only fitting that you follow something with
I know. Coffee, right? Punch in the face. So between the two, I get a real nice variety of topics and subject matter. So those are the two that I like to check out on a regular basis. How about you?
So do they have like newsletters? Do you follow them on social? Like, how
I get
do
an
they keep up?
email. eMarketer gives me like a weekly highlights type deal, and then Espresso does the same.
Gotcha. So search engine land and marketing land are kind of parallel, one and the same, but those are two that I get emails from all the time. So specific to search engine land is a little bit maybe more tactical. And then there is some overlap, but things that are pertaining specifically to marketing land tend to be maybe more like brand or industry updates and news. They're owned by the same company, so there's a lot of overlap and things like
sure.
that. But I like looking at those, and even if I just scroll through the headlines and just get synopsis, I like looking at those. And then also internally, we've watched some webinars from Social Media Examiner, so that one I think is pretty practical. I've heard a lot of people talk about it too, but that one I think is pretty practical how-tos and relevant information for how to use
How do
social
you, as our listeners, what are some of the venues you go to gather information?
Is Sam still there? He'll probably list like 10 of them.
Probably.
Content Marketing Institute is also another good one. A lot of email recommendations or like blog recommendations and stuff on how to create some of that comes through there. But there's a lot of really good resources online and even just podcasts and stuff. I feel like there's never enough time in the day. But I also like how different platforms will present things in different ways, or there's different voices that come through. So, Jess, you're smiling like
Sam
there's
didn't have
some-
any.
No,
Oh.
the light's just hot.
Well, I think the most exciting thing that I want to tell people about today is our upcoming webinar.
Yes.
So we have a free webinar on June 21st.
10 a.m.
Yeah.
Central Standard Time.
And we're going to be talking about email marketing. So Sam, our content specialist, our content manager, and then Jasmine, one of our account managers, will be partnering to talk through some of your tips, best practices.
Yep, they're going to cover some how-tos. I got some real quick ones here. How to capture people's email addresses through unique lead capture techniques. Integrate a CRM with your email campaign and automate email responses. Break down the elements of an email and how to optimize each one to deliver the best results. And talking about data and data collection. Analyze email results and optimize your campaign based on your contacts' actions with the email.
So I think this one will be really nice, especially after a lot of this security conversation and some of these security and data updates, to talk about how you can collect and engage and build a list and not utilize people's data in a way that it shouldn't be, or really making sure that you're collecting that data or those contacts in the way that they're supposed to be or way that they should. So,
And if you want more information, go to our website, keymediasolutions.com. On the top navigation bar, go to Academy, and you can get more information on the webinar.
I think T's going to post a link for us too, so there should be a link posted in the comments somewhere. If not, we'll do it right after, I guess. But yeah, it's totally free. Really, we just want to get this information out to everybody and share the wealth. So.
Absolutely. Sure.
Perfect. Link is in the comments.
Woo!
Awesome.
Thank you. So
Thanks.
I think that's all we've got for today. Really enjoyed your guys' time and getting down our rabbit hole, Sam. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next Friday.
Next Friday.